The monitors said I was unconscious. My family was already talking like they hoped I would never open my eyes again. They were wrong about both things, and that mistake would eventually cost every one of them more than they could imagine. But I'm getting ahead of the story. My name is Matt Harris. I'm 58 years old, and I live in Naples, Florida, in a neighborhood called Pelican Bay. We had a 4-bedroom house on Creighton Road. Beautiful place. The kind of house people drive past and assume everything inside must be perfect. Back in 2001, I started a mid-sized logistics company called Harris Supply Solutions from a cramped office off Tamiami Trail North. By 2024, we had 47 employees, 3 major warehouse contracts, and enough revenue to keep my accountant smiling every quarter. I say had, like all of that belongs in the past. There's a reason for that. We'll get there. My wife Sandra was 54. We'd been together for 32 years and married for 30. My son Carl was 28. Technically, he worked for the company. In reality, his contribution mostly involved forwarding emails, showing up late to meetings, and making sure he never missed the company Christmas party. My daughter Eva was 25. She lived about 20 minutes away in East Naples and usually called every other Sunday. Most of the time, the call ended with her asking me for something. Then there was Adrian Cooper, 35 years old. Sandra had gotten pregnant with Adrian when she was young, after a relationship with a high school boyfriend named Cooper. They never married. The man drifted around the edges of Adrian's childhood, but calling him a father would have been generous. He couldn't keep a steady job. He rarely helped financially. Sandra had full legal custody. When I met her, she was 22 years old, raising a 4-year-old boy by herself, and I fell completely in love with her. We were young, we were broke, and somehow at the time, that didn't seem to matter. We married 2 years later, almost exactly when I was gambling everything I had on starting Harris Supply Solutions. Adrian was 6 by then. From that point forward, I raised him like he was my own son. His biological father was still alive, so we never went through a formal adoption. Adrian kept the Cooper name, but as far as I was concerned, he was family. Years later, I even made him vice president of operations. I trusted that man with almost everything I had, and when I say everything, I mean it. We'll come back to him. We'll come back to all of them. It was a Tuesday near the end of August when my life split into a before and an after. I'd spent most of the evening at the office. Our Tamiami Trail location was on the 3rd floor, and the air conditioning had been acting up again. I'd told Carl at least 3 times to get someone out there to repair it. Naturally, he hadn't. It's strange what your brain remembers after something terrible happens. A broken air conditioner shouldn't matter, but afterward, details like that stick to you. I left the office around 9:40 that night. At a red light on US 41, I checked my phone. Sandra had sent me a message. Dinner's in the fridge. That's the last normal thing I remember. The light turned green. I pulled into the intersection. Then, everything disappeared. A pickup truck blew through the red light at close to 55 miles an hour and slammed directly into the driver's side of my car. Later, the paramedics said I was lucky. They said the seatbelt probably saved my life. They said plenty of things I wasn't conscious enough to hear. 3 days later, part of me woke up, and sometimes I wish it hadn't, because once I became aware of what was happening around me, I started hearing things no father should ever hear. Here's something nobody really explains about being trapped in an unconscious body. It isn't exactly like sleeping. At least it wasn't for me. It felt more like being locked inside a dark room without a handle on the door. I could hear things. Voices, footsteps, the steady electronic beeping beside my bed. Sometimes I could even understand entire conversations. But I couldn't open my eyes. I couldn't lift a finger. I couldn't tell anyone I was there. I was trapped inside my own body, listening. Naples Community Hospital, 3rd floor ICU. That's where I was. I know because I heard one of the nurses say it. The first familiar voice I recognized belonged to Sandra. The second belonged to a doctor. It was the 3rd day after the accident, probably sometime in the morning. Judging by the noise in the hallway, Mr. Harris is stable. The doctor's voice was calm. His brain activity is improving. We're cautiously optimistic, but he may remain unconscious for another week, possibly longer. We'll continue monitoring him. Then Sandra asked a question. And if he doesn't improve? There was a short pause. Then we would revisit his care plan. We could consider transferring him to a long-term, acute care facility. Another voice spoke. Carl, what kind of care plan? The doctor continued. Depending on his condition, we may eventually need to discuss how aggressive you want treatment to be. Ventilator support, resuscitation, measures like that. Silence. Then Sandra spoke. Her voice was so calm, it scared me more than if she'd been crying. He always said he wouldn't want to be kept alive by machines. My mind froze. What? If it gets to that point, she continued, if his heart stops or something happens, I want to sign whatever paperwork says you don't bring him back. She hesitated. The DNR, that's what it's called, right? Something inside my chest seemed to collapse. Had my wife just told the doctor not to save me? Then Carl jumped in, almost too quickly. He told us that himself. His voice sounded rehearsed. He always said if something like this happened, he wouldn't want to become a burden. That's just who Dad is. No, it wasn't. I had never said that. Not once. Who sits around at 58 planning what their family should do if a truck crushes the driver's side of their car? Sandra continued. He's 58. A poser. He's lived a full life. A full life. 58. My wife of 30 years was standing beside my hospital bed telling a doctor that 58 years was enough. Like I was an appliance that had reached the end of its warranty. He cares about everyone else so much, she said. He wouldn't want us suffering because of him. Then I heard it. A small, sharp plastic click. A pen cap. She signed the DNR paperwork right beside my bed. I couldn't scream. I couldn't reach for her. I couldn't even open my eyes. All I could do was lie there and listen. And then one thought came into my head. Don't react. Don't move. Listen. That decision may have saved my life more than the seatbelt did. They came back that evening. All 4 of them. I heard the hospital door open. Chair legs scraped against the floor. Someone opened a soda. I'm almost certain it was Carl. Of course it was Carl. Eva spoke first. He looks exactly the same. He's stable, Sandra answered. The doctor thinks it could be another week. Eva exhaled. Not the kind of sigh you make when you're scared. The kind you make when your flight gets delayed. Another week? Mom, I have things going on. I can't keep driving out here every couple of days. Sandra's voice sharpened slightly. Things going on? Your father is in intensive care. Carl interrupted. Nobody said she has to come every 2 days. Eva went quiet for a moment. Then she said it. Another pause. He was never really there for my stuff. So I don't understand why I'm supposed to rearrange my entire life now. There it was. Sandra said her name softly. Eva. It wasn't really a warning. More like an instinctive reaction from a mother. I'm serious, Eva continued. Every school play, every graduation thing, every event, he was always working. There was always a meeting, a client, another deal. Now suddenly we're supposed to stop everything. And here's the part that hurt. She wasn't completely wrong. I did work too much. I missed things. I made mistakes. But I wasn't working because I didn't care about them. I was building something for them. For Sandra. For Carl. For Eva. For Adrian. For all of us. Then Adrian finally spoke. His voice was controlled and steady. Exactly the same voice he used during board meetings when everyone else was getting emotional. Matt made it clear he never wanted to become a burden. Matt, not Dad. Not even now. I think we should respect that. Exactly, Carl said. Then his voice dropped lower. Besides, once the estate gets settled, the trust starts paying out. My entire mind went still. Carl kept talking. I looked through the folder in his study last year. I know what my share is. Sandra snapped at him. Carl. What? I'm just saying. Not here. Silence. But it was already too late. I had heard him. My 8-year-old son had gone through my private documents. He knew what he expected to inherit. And while I was lying 3 feet away from him fighting to stay alive, he had already entered my death into his financial plans. Like I wasn't his father. Like I was a bond approaching maturity. There are feelings you can't describe without making them sound smaller than they really were. So I won't try. Over the next 4 days, I heard things that will stay with me for the rest of my life. At one point, Carl stood near the doorway, talking on his phone. Apparently, he thought a man in a coma didn't count as an audience. Yeah, he's probably not waking up. A pause. Few more days, maybe. Then, listen, can you start looking at some properties around Bonita Springs? I'll have liquidity soon. Liquidity. That was the word he used. His father was lying unconscious in the ICU, and to Carl, I was about to become liquidity. I heard Eva telling Sandra that the house on Creighton Road would probably be too large for one person. She suggested Sandra consider downsizing afterward. After. That was all she called it. After. As if my death were just another date on the calendar. Then there was Adrian. Quiet. Efficient. Professional Adrian. The man I'd promoted. The man I'd taken to Dolphins games. The man I'd lent $20,000 to in 2019 because I believed family took care of family. I heard him talking to Sandra, and I remember the words almost exactly. The sooner the estate is settled, the cleaner everything will be. I can handle the transition at Harris Supply. I already know where everything is. Even then, something about that sentence bothered me. I know where everything is. I remember thinking, I bet you do, Adrian. At the time, I didn't fully understand why those words felt wrong, but something cold settled in my stomach and stayed there. Sandra answered quietly, "Let's not rush anything." "Of course," Adrian replied. "I'm only saying we should be prepared." Prepared. Of course you were. Day 7. Late August. Naples heat pressing against the hospital windows. I opened my eyes. The nurse actually shouted. In a good way. She called for the doctor, and suddenly the room filled with movement. Lights, voices, shoes against the floor. The kind of chaos that happens when people have stopped expecting good news and suddenly get some. The doctor rushed in and started testing me. "What year is it?" I answered. "Do you know where you are?" I answered. "Who's the president?" Answered again. "Can you squeeze my hand?" I squeezed it. Every question, every test, I passed them all. They thought I had just come back. What they didn't know was that I'd been there the entire time, listening. 20 minutes later, Sandra walked through the hospital door. The expression on her face was complicated. There was relief there. I want to be fair about that. She looked relieved. But underneath it, for just a fraction of a second, I saw something else, something darker, something that vanished so quickly I almost convinced myself I had imagined it. Then, she rushed toward me. She hugged me. She cried. I was terrified. I wrapped my arms around her. "I know." I paused. "I'm lucky to have you." Every word that came out of my mouth was a lie. And for the first time in 30 years of marriage, lying to my wife didn't bother me at all. They discharged me the following day. Carl opened the car door for me like he'd suddenly remembered how to be a son. Eva showed up with flowers. Yellow flowers. I've hated yellow flowers for as long as anyone in my family should have known me. But fine. Adrian shook my hand. "Welcome back, Matt." He smiled. "We were worried sick." I smiled right back. Every one of them got the same smile. Good to be back. And believe me, I was back. I just wasn't the same man who had gone into that intersection. Now I had something I hadn't had before. Time. And what I discovered once I started looking was worse than anything I'd heard in that hospital room. Considering what I'd already heard, that's saying something. There's a particular kind of silence that comes over a man when he knows something nobody else realizes he knows. I lived inside that silence for almost 4 weeks. Coming home from Naples Community Hospital felt like stepping onto a theater stage halfway through the performance. Everyone else already knew their roles. Sandra knew when to fuss over me. Carl knew when to carry something. Eva knew when to pretend she was concerned. Adrian knew when to sound professional and dependable. And somehow, I had walked back into a play where everyone had already written my character out. Sandra arranged pillows behind my back. Carl brought my bag inside. Eva had stocked the refrigerator. She had actually gone grocery shopping. For me, in 25 years, I couldn't remember her doing that once. Adrian stood in the doorway of my house on Creighton Road. "We've got everything handled at the office, Matt." He gave me that reassuring corporate smile. "Don't even think about work. Just recover." "Thanks, son." I said the word deliberately. "Son." It tasted bitter in my mouth, but I smiled anyway. I sat in my chair. I ate the soup Sandra brought me, and for the next several weeks, I gave the performance of my life. Tired, grateful, a little confused, still weak from the accident. A 8-year-old man trying to recover. That was the character they saw. The truth was very different. By the second week, I started telling everyone I still had headaches, a little dizziness, trouble concentrating. I said I wasn't ready to go back to the office. Sandra believed me instantly, which told me something unpleasant about how closely she'd been paying attention to me over the last few years. Carl gave me a sympathetic nod. Then he returned to whatever he considered work. From what I could tell, that involved golf, lunches, and very little actual responsibility. Eva texted every few days. Nothing emotional, just enough to say she had checked in. Adrian was different. "Take all the time you need, Matt." He sounded almost generous. "I've got the office covered." "I'm sure you do, Adrian." The first person I called was a lawyer. Not our regular family attorney. Definitely not Tom Briggs, the man on 5th Avenue South who'd handled our paperwork for 15 years. I suddenly couldn't stop wondering how many conversations Sandra might have had with him without me knowing. No, I needed someone outside the circle. Someone who didn't know Sandra. Someone who didn't know Adrian. Someone who had no reason to protect anybody but me. An old college friend gave me a name. Ray Bennett. Ray was in his mid-50s and worked out of a modest office in North Naples, not far from Immokalee Road. No expensive lobby. No giant glass conference room. No receptionist trying to make the place look important. He didn't need any of that. He had a firm handshake and the kind of eyes that stayed on you when most people would look away. I sat across from his desk. "I need to know whether my family is stealing from me." Ray didn't react. I continued. "And I need you to begin with the assumption that the answer is yes." He leaned back slightly. "Then let's find out." That was the beginning. My second call went to a private investigator named Frank Dolan. Frank worked out of Golden Gate. Small office. Plain furniture. He drove a gray sedan so forgettable you could park it beside your house for a week and probably never notice it. He'd been doing investigative work for around 20 years. You could tell by the way he listened. He didn't interrupt, didn't make dramatic faces, didn't give me reassuring nonsense. He just sat there and absorbed everything. I told him what happened in the hospital. I told him about Carl, talking about Bonita Springs properties. I told him about Adrian saying he knew where everything was. And I told him exactly how Sandra sounded when she told the doctor she didn't want me revived. Frank took notes. Then he looked up. "How long have you been married?" 30 years. He stared at me for a second. Then he slowly wrote something else down. By week 3, things stopped being suspicious. They became ugly. Ray called me on a Thursday morning. Sandra was at the gym. "Matt, I need you to come to my office." Something in his voice told me this wasn't a conversation for the phone. "And when you get here, sit down before I show you what we found." It was the first time I'd driven myself since the accident. I left Creighton Road and headed toward US 41. The same roads I'd driven for years suddenly looked different. Maybe because I was different. I parked behind Ray's building and walked inside. There was a folder waiting on his desk. It was thick, not a few pages. Closer to a short novel. Ray put one hand on it. "Your vice president of operations has been taking money out of Harris Supply Solutions for approximately 3 years." I already knew who he meant. "Adrien." "How much?" Ray looked directly at me. "About $500,000. $500,000. He hadn't stolen it all at once. That would have been stupid. Adrian wasn't stupid. He'd done it carefully. Inflated vendor invoices, fake expense accounts, transfers disguised inside normal business activity, and eventually, money routed through a shell company called Cooper Logistics LLC, registered in Delaware. Quiet, clean, almost invisible, unless you knew where to look. Ray flipped through several pages. Adrian Cooper is your stepson. Yes? We recovered internal communications that help explain what he thought he was doing. Ray paused. According to these messages, he was concerned that because he wasn't your biological son, your will might not provide for him. I said nothing, so he described the money as a way of securing himself. Securing himself. That's what he called stealing from me. I sat there for a long moment. Adrian was afraid I wouldn't take care of him. That was his justification. I had paid his rent when he was 24 and struggling. I had promoted him over people with twice his experience. I had taken him to Dolphins games, client dinners, fishing trips down in the Keys. I had looked that man in the eye more than once and told him, "Your family, Adrian. You don't need to worry." And he'd robbed me anyway. Ray closed one section of the folder. There's more. Of course there was. There was always more. Sandra Harris co-signed 11 of the transactions. I stared at him. Ray continued. She has signing authority on several company accounts. Some of this money couldn't have moved without her approval. Sandra knew. My wife hadn't simply stood beside my hospital bed and told a doctor to let me die. She had been helping her son steal from the company I'd spent more than 20 years building. I didn't cry. I want that understood. I just sat in Ray Bennett's office and felt something inside me shut. Not explode. Not crack. Shut. Like a heavy door closing slowly. Quietly. Firmly. Click. The properties. My voice sounded calmer than I felt. Tell me about the properties. Ray opened another section of the folder. A few months before my accident, Adrian had prepared a power of attorney. Sandra had helped. Her signature on the document was real. Mine wasn't. Someone had forged my name. Then, immediately after the crash, when it looked like I might never leave the ICU, Adrian moved. Fast. He used the fake power of attorney to file fraudulent quitclaim deeds with the county. He inserted himself as a co-owner on 2 properties. My house on Creighton Road, and the Harris Supply Warehouse. I stared at Ray. He was ready. Ray nodded. This wasn't something he invented after the accident. He had the documents prepared beforehand. He was waiting. That's what it looks like. For what? Ray didn't answer. He didn't have to. For me to become helpless, maybe dead. Can we undo it? Yes. He tapped the folder. Our document examiner has already confirmed your signature was forged. The analysis is strong. He slid another document toward me. I've prepared a lawsuit to freeze both properties and remove Adrian's name from the deeds. I looked at the paperwork. Then Ray paused. But the moment we file, he'll be served. He'll know everything. He sat back. And suddenly I remembered something Sandra had mentioned a few days earlier. Our anniversary. 30 years. She wanted a dinner. Maybe a party. Everyone together. Everyone smiling. Everyone pretending we were still a family. Don't file it yet. Ray studied me. When? Monday morning. After the anniversary party? After the party. Ray slowly nodded. So Adrian walks into Saturday night, believing he owns part of your house. I looked at him. Exactly. 2 days later, Frank Dolan called. I was sitting on the back porch, watching the water in the canal behind our house. It barely moved. Neither did I. My phone buzzed. Frank didn't waste time. You want to hear about the affair? My hand tightened around the phone. Tell me. His name is Scott Wheeler. Frank continued. 34 years old. Certified personal trainer. Works at Naples Fitness near Pine Ridge. A pause. Your wife has been seeing him for 14 months. I didn't speak. This isn't something casual, Matt. 14 months. My brain did the calculation automatically. 14 months earlier, Sandra and I had gone to a New Year's Eve party at a neighbor's house in Pelican Bay. She had worn a blue dress. I remembered that. We danced. Nothing special. Just one of those songs people dance to because it's midnight and you're married. When the clock struck 12, she kissed me. This is going to be a good year. 2 weeks later, apparently, she started training with Scott Wheeler. I lowered the phone, stared at the canal. 30 years. And they hadn't all been bad years. That's what made it worse. We had real memories, real vacations, real laughter. Arguments, too. Hard stretches. But good years. A lot of good years. I wasn't some husband who disappeared emotionally for decades. I didn't forget her birthday. I didn't skip Christmas. Yes, I worked hard, probably harder than I should have. I missed things. I know that. But I came home. I provided. I built a life for that family. And now Sandra was dividing that life among her children and her personal trainer. My hands started shaking. Then the nausea hit. Cold. Violent. I grabbed the porch railing because for a second I thought I might fall. I wanted to scream. I wanted to walk inside and break every plate in that kitchen. I wanted to tear something apart just so something outside of me looked the way I felt inside. But I didn't. I slowed my breathing, closed my eyes, waited until my hands stopped shaking, because I understood something. If I lost control now, they wouldn't only get my money. They would get the warning. And if they knew I knew, they could run. They could hide evidence. They could prepare. No, not yet. I wasn't finished. Not even close. They'd win. That was the thought that stopped me. If I exploded too soon, if I confronted Sandra or Adrian before I understood the whole picture, they'd have time to cover their tracks. So I kept moving. There was still one piece I needed. His name was Glenn Ferris. Glenn was 44 and had worked in our accounting department for 6 years. Sharp guy. Too sharp for Carl's comfort. A few months earlier, Carl had demoted him after what he called a personality problem. What that really meant was Glenn had corrected him in front of other employees. Twice. Apparently, that was enough to qualify as insubordination in Carl's world. I called Glenn and asked him to meet me at a coffee shop on 3rd Street South in downtown Naples. He arrived 5 minutes early. Black coffee. No sugar. No small talk. When I walked in, he looked at me like he'd been waiting a long time for this exact conversation. Before I even sat down, he spoke. I knew something was wrong with the vendor accounts. I stopped. Glenn continued. I flagged them twice. He leaned forward. Carl told me I was overstepping. I almost laughed. Of course he did. But Carl wasn't running it. I looked at him. Glenn lowered his voice. It was Adrian. Then he paused. And Eva. The coffee cup stopped halfway to my mouth. Eva. Glenn nodded. He pulled a small thumb drive from his pocket and slid it across the table. Adrian was routing the money through Cooper Logistics LLC. I know that part. Then look at the secondary payments. I stared at the thumb drive. What secondary payments? Monthly checks. To who? Glenn looked directly at me. Eve Design Boutique. For a second, I thought I had misunderstood him. Eva? Yes. He took a sip of coffee. She found out what Sandra and Adrian were doing about a year ago. I waited. Instead of telling you, she demanded a piece. My stomach tightened. A piece. Money. Every month. Glenn nodded toward the thumb drive. It's all there. He paused. She basically told them she'd stay quiet as long as they paid her. I sat completely still. She's been using stolen company money to fund her lifestyle. There are moments when you expect betrayal to stop. You think surely you've reached the bottom. Your wife, your stepson, your son waiting for the inheritance. At some point, you tell yourself there has to be one person left. One. Apparently, I hadn't reached the bottom yet. Over the next 10 days, Glenn became my eyes inside Harris Supply. He had backups, personal copies, old spreadsheets, vendor records, email exports. Glenn was exactly the kind of employee people call obsessive until the day they desperately need him. Ray loved him. Frank loved him. I loved him, because with Glenn's records, we could rebuild the entire scheme from the beginning. Dates, Amounts, approvals, transfers, every step, every signature, every dollar. Adrian moving the money, Sandra approving it, Eva receiving her cut. $500,000. 3 years, 43 separate transactions. All documented, all cross-referenced. And while they were doing it, I was driving home late from Tamiami Trail, believing I was building something for my family. Technically, I was. I just hadn't realized I was building something for them to steal. By the end of the 4th week, I finally understood what I was looking at. Sandra, 14-month affair with Scott Wheeler, 11 fraudulent transactions carrying her approval, helped Adrian prepare the false power of attorney, stood beside my hospital bed, and told the doctor not to bring me back. Adrien, $500,000, stolen over 3 years, 43 transactions, a forged power of attorney. His name placed on my house and company warehouse. And in the hospital, he supported the idea that I didn't want to be revived. Carl, as far as I could tell, he wasn't involved in the actual fraud. He didn't know about Sandra's affair, but he sat beside my bed talking about inheritance. Bonita Springs real estate. Liquidity. My death was already a financial event to him. And Eva. Eva knew about the theft. She discovered it. She had a choice. Tell me. Protect me. Do literally anything a daughter might reasonably do. Instead, she negotiated a monthly payment for her silence. There it was. My family. All of them. Different crimes. Different excuses. Same conclusion. They had already started dividing my life while I was still breathing. Ray had the lawsuit ready. Everything was prepared to freeze the property and remove Adrian's name from both deeds. It sat in his office waiting for Monday morning. Adrian knew nothing. As far as he was concerned, he owned part of my house, part of my warehouse, and I was still home recovering, eating soup, watching television, barely able to think straight. Let him believe it. He had 6 days left. I handled the money next. Sandra believed our joint personal savings account held most of what mattered, around $800,000. She was wrong. For years, I'd been putting corporate distributions into a separate structure that she rarely paid attention to. I moved every dollar that legally belonged to me into an individual account at another bank. No tricks. No forged signatures. No shell companies. My money. My name. My distributions. Then I changed my will. The old version had been generous. Very generous. The new one was more educational. Here's something you need to understand about me. I'm not naturally dramatic. I'm not the kind of man who throws furniture or punches walls. I'm a logistics guy. I like things organized. Step 1. Step 2. Step 3. I like clean solutions. Minimum waste. Maximum effect. What I was planning wasn't revenge in the movie sense. No screaming. No violence. No wild threats. It was logistics. And I had one final delivery to make. Our 30th wedding anniversary was 6 days away. Sandra brought it up one evening over dinner. She sounded cheerful, almost excited. We should do something special this year. I looked across the table at the woman who had been approving stolen money while sleeping with another man. I smiled. Absolutely. Her face brightened. Really? Let's invite everyone. She blinked. Everyone? Neighbors. Family. Friends. I leaned back. Make it a real celebration. Sandra smiled. Then she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I squeezed hers back. Every one of them would be there. Sandra, Carl, Eva, Adrien, and every one of them would finally receive exactly what they had earned. Nobody throws a celebration for a man they already started burying, but that's basically what my family did. Sandra planned most of it herself. 14 neighbors from Pelican Bay were invited. A few couples we'd known for years. The Hendersons from down the road. Our pastor from Grace Community Church. Sandra ordered catering from a restaurant on 5th Avenue South. Real catering. Not supermarket trays. She rented tall cocktail tables covered in white linen. She bought decorations. And then she bought a banner. 30 years, the Harris family. 3 days before the party, I saw it rolled up on the kitchen counter. I stood there staring at those words. The Harris family. I almost smiled. Sure, let's celebrate that. Saturday evening arrived. Late October in Naples. One of those nights when the heat finally breaks after sunset, and standing outside no longer feels like punishment. Sandra had lights strung across the backyard. Their reflection shimmered in the canal behind the house. For a moment, the place looked peaceful. Almost. Carl arrived first. He was dressed like he was headed to a resort. That was basically his permanent uniform. He slapped me lightly on the shoulder. "Looking good, Dad." I smiled. "You really bounced back. Feeling great?" I meant it. Honestly, better than I have in years. He had no idea how true that was. Eva arrived next. She hugged Sandra. Then she handed me a card. I opened it. "Dad, I'm so glad you're still here. Love you." I stared at the handwriting. For a second, I saw a little girl, asleep in the back seat after school. The child I used to carry inside because I didn't want to wake her. I wondered when that girl disappeared. "Thank you, sweetheart." Adrian arrived last. Naturally, Adrian liked being the final person through a door. He thought it made people notice him. He was wearing a blazer. He came toward me with both hands extended and gave me that practiced warmth he used with clients. 30 years, Matt. He smiled. "That's something." "It really is." I looked at him. "I've actually got something for everyone tonight." Adrian raised an eyebrow. "A gift? A little one?" "What kind?" I smiled. "The life-changing kind." He laughed. He thought I was joking. By 8 o'clock, the backyard was full. Neighbors talking. Glasses clinking. Music low enough to make everyone feel sophisticated. Sandra moved through the crowd in a green dress. She looked relaxed. Beautiful, even. Like a woman without a single secret in the world. Carl was working on his second bourbon. Eva stood near the canal talking with one of the neighbors. Adrian was networking. Actually, networking. At my anniversary party. Of course he was. Outside, Ray Bennett sat in his car with a folder on the passenger seat. Frank had already made a call earlier that afternoon. 2 Collier County Sheriff's deputies were parked in an unmarked vehicle 2 houses down. Everything was ready. Every person. Every document. Every move. I walked toward the center of the patio, picked up a fork, tapped it lightly against my glass. The sound carried. "Can I get everyone's attention?" Conversations faded. Sandra looked toward me. Then she gave me that public smile. The warm one. The smile she wore when other people were watching. Carl lifted his glass. Eva turned around. Adrian folded his arms. 14 neighbors. My pastor. My family. An audience. Perfect. I looked around. 30 years. A few people smiled. 30 years is a long time. I let the words sit. "You go through a lot together." "That's right," someone said. "You build things." People nodded. "You sacrifice." Another nod. "You make choices every day and hope that, when you look back, those choices were worth it." Sandra was still smiling. Then I changed direction. Nearly dying has a way of clarifying things. The yard became quieter. When I was lying in that hospital bed at Naples Community, I had a lot of time. I paused. Time to think. Sandra's smile tightened slightly. Time to remember. Her head tilted. Just a little. There. She felt it. The temperature had changed. And time to listen. The smile stayed on her face, but her eyes changed. I continued. "I heard things in that room I will never forget. Nobody moved. Things that changed the way I see my life. Then I looked at Sandra and my family. Silence. So tonight, on our 30th anniversary, in front of everyone who watched us build this life together, I reached toward the small table beside me. 4 envelopes were sitting there. Each one had a name written across the front in my handwriting. I'd like to share some of what I learned. Nobody spoke. I picked up the first envelope. Carl. My son stepped forward, bourbon still in his hand. There was a faint smile on his face, the expression of a man who thought Dad was about to give him a check. I handed him the envelope. "Open it." He did. His eyes moved across the first page. The smile didn't vanish instantly. It drained away slowly. Inside was a printed transcript. His own words from the ICU. Once the estate clears, the trust starts paying out. I looked at the folder in his study. I know what my share is. Then, I'll have liquidity soon. Bonita Springs. Every word. His face changed. Underneath the transcript was a letter from Harris Supply Solutions. Human Resources. Effective immediately. I watched him reach the second page. Carl, you're terminated from Harris Supply Solutions. His eyes snapped up toward me. Your company gas card stops working at midnight. Dad, the company paid lease on your car ends too. He stared at me. I let the silence do the work, and before you ask about the inheritance, I waited until everyone was listening. My new will leaves you exactly $1,000. His mouth opened. I smiled slightly. You can use it for liquidity. That word hit him exactly where I intended. Dad, I'm not finished. I reached for the second envelope. Eva. She didn't move at first. Then she walked toward me slowly. Her arms were already crossed. She took the envelope like she expected something inside to bite her. She opened it. Another transcript. Her section highlighted. He was never there for any of my stuff. He was always working. Why should I rearrange my whole life for this? Her face tightened. But that wasn't the part I wanted her to see. Not yet. Beneath the transcript was something else. A photograph. Plain paper. Hospital security footage. Time-stamped. Day 3. The exact window when she stood beside my bed and discussed whether I was worth keeping alive. Eva stared down at it, and for the first time that night, I watched fear replace entitlement in my daughter's face.